Right.
Come on in, everybody. We see you out there. Thanks for tuning in. It's Comics by Night, folks. Or if you're where Russ and Glenn are, it's brunch. So come on in. We see you out there. Brunch.
No, it's only brunch in West London. Everywhere else, it's just 10 o'clock.
It's just 10 o'clock.
Okay.
You have to have an avocado to have brunch.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to run the opening and then get to work. As soon as I find the opening. Here we are.
What was that? This is not a charade. We need total concentration. Now, once again, this time, with theory.
There we are. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Comics by Night.
I love that introduction. Did you say that was Meredith who did that or something? Did you say?
Way back when Meredith sent me a couple of clips together and said, "Hey, you should run this on your program." And I says, "Okay." So when it came time to do the opening for Breakfast Buzz, I felt it was a good time to use that video.
Yeah,
it kind of says it all. So it's got that rooster crow in it. It's got the explosion. It's got those cupcakes. It looks great. And then the other openings, because we're all teachers, just like the teacher there, we need total concentration.
Yeah,
that's right.
What's it from that clip? Is it from Kung Fu or something?
Kentucky Fried Movie, is it? Oh.
Yeah, that is a parody movie called Kentucky Fried Movie. It's Kentucky Fried Movie is almost like a full day of television programming, a parody of a day of television programming packed in about an hour and a half movie.
It was the most bizarre film.
It's a collection of different clips and trailers and stuff. They have a trailer in there for an End of the World movie called That's Armageddon that has George Lazenby in it. That's just hilarious. Where they're all he's doing this over the top dramatic narration with this sweetheart in front of a hospital as everything's just coming apart and ambulances are driving by and dummies, dead bodies are falling and hitting in front of him and all of this. I love you so much. That kind of thing. They also have the classic trailer that Russ remembers for Catholic high school girls in trouble.
Yes. And they were in trouble constantly in the shower.
Yeah. Which has they introduce a new star in her most dramatic role, and they show the girl rolling down a hill. I'd show it here, but we'd get in trouble because there is nudity associated with that particular trailer. So that they have like Bill Bixby on there talking about sleep aids, and there's actually a scene in there. Is that the one? It's got I can't remember the guy is in it, but he goes into a theater that has Feel Around in it, and he's sitting. Because back then they had all these different gimmicks to get you into the theater. Smell-O-Rama and that kind of stuff. Well, he went into a theater with Feel Around. And he's sitting there in the seat as an usher's behind him, and the usher's abusing him as the show is going on. And then they're about to show their second feature, which is a erotic title, and the guy gets up screaming and runs out of the theater, and the other guy, the usher that's behind him, is putting a little spurzer in his throat. Yeah.
God,
really good.
But anyway, inside of that movie is another movie called A Fistful of Yen, which is a parody of Bruce Lee movie. Yeah, which has that in there. It also has a very classic scene because he goes to break up the secret empire in the underground laboratory, and there's two scientists there working in the laboratory, and from out of nowhere he produces a little toy robot. The main character does, and he sets a toy robot down in the in the doorway, and it starts rolling into the lab. And the two scientists look at it, and the one scientist starts screaming, toy robot, and he goes jumping out of a window to get away. And the other scientist is like looking at him like, what? And he goes, toy robot. He starts laughing at it. And the robot opens up its chest to a couple of machine guns. And the robot goes, eat lead, sucker, and blows him away. It's just hilarious. You'd have to be there.
Did you see that? Did you see that? Have you seen The Office? You'll have seen The Office, Russ, haven't you?
Yeah. I've not watched the American one.
No.
I tried to watch the American one once.
Well,
and I just couldn't get to it.
There's a great part in it where there's a computer guy comes in and he's fixing the computers, and a real smart ass. And he's talking about Bruce Lee films, and he says, well, Bruce Lee wasn't really killed. He was sent undercover for the FBI or something to infiltrate the triad in China. And one of the characters says, I can believe that. You'd send the world's most famous Asian actor as an undercover agent.
Yeah.
Charles, how are you doing?
Charles, good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Can you
Very
see
early,
me?
Charles. Very
Sounds
early.
like you have a fan running this morning, though, but that's okay.
I do. You know what?
Either that or
I'm going to kill it. Hold on.
Right. Or he could be flying as we speak.
It's killing the fan.
Speaking
There's
of
blood
Kentucky Fried
spurting
Movie,
out the side of the screen.
it's the Kentucky Fried Movie was done by the guys who eventually did Airplane. That would tell you the level of humor that it was. So if this was part of Kentucky Fried Movie, Charles would have whipped out a gun and literally shot the fan.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes,
I'm gonna go kill it.
And Elvis used to do that kind of thing when he was fed up with the TV channel.
Does that sound any better?
You're fine.
Channels and nothing on.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got the AC on, but I had a fan on as well.
It's 46 degrees here this morning.
Yeah, well, it is here, but I'm in a basement that takes it's about February when this place cools off.
There you go. I love basement. I got a basement like that too.
It's a walkout basement, but still, it's a basement.
Yeah. Sweet. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to Comics by Night. I'm your host, Randy Zimmerman. I've been doing comics for many, many decades. Freelance work, retailed for over 10 years. Just love this business. So met my wife while I was retailing. I did a newspaper for over 10 years. Local comics and entertainment paper around my hometown. Done a lot of freelance work for a lot of companies. And now I'm Arrow Comics that is printing such books as, he said, reaching HeroBot Zero, Calico, HeroBot Zero, which is all my book, pretty much all my book. Calico, which I created and wrote, and Paragon, which I also created and wrote, among many others. So we're glad you're here this morning. This is Comics by Night or Comics by Brunch, if you're where Glenn and Russ is, or at least in that general area. So I'm happy to have you here. We're going to talk comics and how to make them. So joining me today is Mr. Glenn B. Fleming. Glenn, introduce yourself.
I am Glenn Fleming. I worked in graphics for 40 years, doing photo shoots and artwork and typesetting and printing and all that kind of stuff. Wrote a lot of words as well, and decided to become a full-time author. I've got 10 books on Amazon at the moment, varying subjects. The latest one is this one, which is relevant to this show. It's about my 2 trips to Jack Kirby's home in the late 80s and early 90s. And with that, you get a DVD. There it is, a DVD of me talking with Jack in the studio. It's got lots of photographs in it and all that kind of thing. It talks about my journey to him. Oh, yes. Where's yours, Charles? I'm the creator.
Sorry, Charles, we didn't mean to make you feel left out.
Just drop in on you there.
I'm the creator of Hatch, which I write and draw, and my wife helps me write it. And the second issue is on Indiegogo soon. This is the first. This is available on Amazon. And I also created and co-publish Comics Unlimited, which is a 100-page quarterly magazine about comics.
Excellent. Also joining us today is Russ Leach. Russ, introduce yourself. as you're arranging
Good
pulling up
day.
more books. Yeah, good
It'd
morning.
be brunch time here, but I've run out of avocado. So, oh dear. Is that have we got an internet issue?
Indie Comics, no, you're fine here.
You fine? I can
Yeah.
hear you.
You seem
All
fine.
right,
Are you frozen?
Okay,
Yeah.
fine.
Go
Yeah, I
ahead,
just
go
keep
ahead.
skipping. The internet over here is just crap. Yeah, so no avocado, but I do draw comics. You can find out about all my comics at rustleach.com. I've done lots of stuff for Marcosia. You can go pick the stuff up on Amazon at the moment. I'm also currently working on a final issue of Doctor Who magazine. You can also pick me up in Batman over here in the UK and Europe, and also my own book, Only Death Can Save Us, which you can still pick up an original copy of the first run on Indiegogo currently, but it's about to be republished by New Haven, and so that will be in the shops for Christmas, and you'll be able to pick that up on Amazon. So you can find out all about me at rustleach.com.
What is the awesome artwork we're looking at?
Yeah, that's. I'm just thumbnailing possible covers for the reprint of book 1
Okay, cool.
of Only Death Can Save Us by New Haven.
All right. Looks like a superhero layout.
Yeah.
Also joining us in a rare occurrence, hopefully be more often, Mr. Charles Santino. Charles, introduce yourself.
Good morning. How is everybody?
Good morning. We're all good.
Good.
All right. I've been around longer than any of these folks, and I'm older and wiser than any of these folks.
Maybe older.
And
No, just
started out with Marvel doing Conan way back in the day, late 80s. And currently, Russ mentioned Marcosia, my character Rammer, who you see in back of me and on my head, and Rammer's also in my head. He's published by Marcosia. This is Rammer, the Corvus Trilogy, Part 1, available everywhere right now. And like I said, Marcosia is the publisher. Harry Marcos is a wonderful guy, and I think to know Harry is to love him.
Okay. We all need to be printed by Marcosia.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, sports car, beard, print by Marcosia. It's one of those things every man needs in his
that what
life
it
at
is?
some point. Yeah.
Awesome. Totally understandable. Well, Charles sent a great suggestion to me this morning, which I was unprepared for. I was actually hoping to talk about writing today. And I was also hoping to have Brian K. Morris on, but apparently he hasn't shown up yet. He probably hasn't woke up yet.
Oh, Bry.
He promised he'd be here. But anyway, what I'd like to do, last week we covered the books that we use for reference and to teach people how to draw. And we just briefly covered writing with the Denny O'Neil DC book that's no longer available anywhere. And if you find it anywhere, people charge high prices for it. That I've seen, it shows. I mean, just ridiculous, $100 for a $20 book. But I'd like to talk about our writing process and how we write our comics, especially how we write our comics, or how we write anything in general, and whatever reference books that we use in order to do that with. So, of course, I would start with the obvious. And that would be the elements of style.
Omit needless words.
By William Strunk. Omit needless words. Well, you have to do that in comics anyway, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just got artwork back on a 4-page Rammer story, and the artist did something no artist has ever done before. He actually did mock-up lettering to show me how I was completely wiping out his artwork with all my words. and I rarely overwrite like that, but I thought, okay, so I got to get rid of half the words in this panel, 3/4 of the words in this panel, and amazingly I was able to do it without really losing any content. I think that the tendency is to overwrite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, plus
definitely.
you write a pretty stoic character, so he can get away with just a couple of words.
Yeah,
his point
but we
across,
get
right?
in. I do his thoughts in the captions,
Mm-hmm.
and I like to elaborate what his thought process is. But I just had to dump half the words, so they were gone.
Just thought the artist might have been sending you indications about where you can stick your words.
That was pretty much it. He was very polite about it, though.
That's pretty much the process that went on with Only Death, book 1 and book 2, getting it lettered. So I would pencil it and have the letters put in over the pencils, so I could see where editing was required before I even went to inks, so that if I needed to, I could give it a little bit more space if it was important.
Yeah.
But otherwise, editing down. I think that the mantra is edit yourself before the editor gets hold of you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you're being concise about specifically in comics, because exactly as Charles is saying, you're limited on space.
Yeah,
So,
you've got to take into account the whole thing, haven't you? Not just drawing nice pictures. You've got to, like we said last week, composition and stuff like that. Because the composition is not only just structuring where the characters and the action or the buildings are; it's where the words are going to fall as well.
Exactly,
which is really important.
Yeah, a sequential artist is also part of the storytelling process,
Yes.
and it's not just pretty pictures to sit behind the words. And you do unfortunately see a little bit more of that these days, where people are striving to execute art really well on the page, but aren't actually telling the story particularly well. Or if they are, it's along the lines of very, as we mentioned last week, flat camera angles. And obviously this show is about the writing aspect, but all those things come into play in comics. It's
I found
part and parcel.
When I started doing Hatch, and he doesn't speak, so there are no word bubbles in there, balloons in there, but there are sound effects. But I found that more of a challenge not to put the words in, because I had to really, really think about the storytelling on them, because no word was going to help me.
And of course, from a writing perspective, it's as much of a challenge, because you can't rely on the spoken word or even the thought word.
That's right.
It's all about display. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the reasons for that madness was also the fact that I wanted to place it in newspapers in, say, Japan, so there'd be no translation problems.
Yes.
So,
there you go.
So that was one of the reasons. Method in the madness. But we said this before about the sequential art. I mean, it's a visual thing. The pictures are the most important to start with, because that's why you pick it up. Nobody ever picked up a comic that said, read this comic. But you see Magneto on there or Galactus, and you'll buy it for that reason. So the illustration is very important too.
Well, Jack Kirby said, "Don't ask, just buy it," when he had Don Rickles on the cover.
I know he did, but nobody over here knew Don Rickles was, so it didn't work, did it? I bought it because it was Jack Kirby, not because he said buy it. So
Jack Kirby on Jimmy Olsen. What?
Yeah.
Madness.
Yeah.
Sheer madness.
I think I've only bought 5 Jimmy Olsen comics in my life, and they were all
Kirby.
Jack Kirby.
If you haven't bought those early Jimmy Olsens where he turns into Elastic Lad or a giant green creature,
I think I've seen them. But
that
was why I didn't buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the artist that smacked me down with that lettering, the last panel actually covered what the picture showed. The picture showed something very important, and that's the way I wrote it. So, but the captions and the balloons covered up the picture. So I was like, wait a minute, you can't see what's the important visual storytelling, and this panel is completely covered up by my illustrious words. So I thought, well, I could either make what's going on in that panel more obvious, but there was really no room for it. So I thought, okay, half the words have to go so we can actually see what's going on in the panel. Yeah. So sometimes it's just too many words covering up prettiness, but in this case, it was too many words covering up the actual story.
Yeah.
It is a constant, not a fight, but a back and forth between a writer and an artist. It's good to have good communication. It does happen quite often that you'll get each panel on a page. You've got 5 or 6 panels on a page, and each one could do with half a page, for what is being asked to be put in the panel. And also direction is very important. So I personally, although I've worked with a myriad of different writers as to how detailed they've made their panel description or their scene description, I don't mind working with that, but I'd rather not that I was told what angle to put on, or how to view the scene 3-dimensionally. I need to be able to reach into that tool set, as it were, to make the story progress, to make it exciting, to make it work, and to make the layout good. But the problem you do have with some writers is there will be a case of there are these many people in the scene, and they're all looking down that way to the street away from us, and the expression on their face is of shock. And it's like, how can I see their faces if they're looking down the street away from us, and there's 10 people in a panel? With 10 things you have to think.
Yeah, with 10 inset panels.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tell you, the only person
that's
I
a great
know...
one. At the top page of a script, it says 5 panels on this page. You go, oh, great. And every one has got an inset panel. No, it's 10 panels on that page.
The only person who could get away with that is probably George Perez. He likes to draw a lot of panels, doesn't he? With 50,000 people in,
But even it's like it's that art direction of that key description that I gave. It's like they're looking away and they're shocked. It's like, well, how do you work that out? So, for instance, as an example, I had several panels in a Doctor Who page, and they were looking at monitors, and there was issues on the monitors, and they wanted to have them pointing at the monitor and describe and reacting to what was on there. But it was if you do that in every panel, they're doing the same thing. They're pointing at a monitor and it's the same angle. Yeah. So I took the executive decision to have the monitors around them and a repeat of what was going on the screen in front of them in the monitors behind them.
Yeah.
So that you could see what the writer was describing as far as what was on the monitors, but at the same time capture different angles, make the scene move, as it were, and still have them react to what they were seeing on the screen. Hopefully that worked. Just have to wait and see when people read it.
Morris.
We're joined this morning also by Mr. Brian K. Morris. Brian, how are you, buddy?
I'm fine. How are you? Welcome to an episode of Writers Are Shit. If they were so talented, why aren't they drawing?
Hey, wait a minute.
Good morning to everyone.
Hold on there a second.
Might want to turn your mic down just a notch, Brian.
Oh, heavens. Everybody complains that I'm not loud enough.
You're kind of booming through this morning just a little.
This is not
bad. Not bad, though.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me get into...
You're perfect. Right there.
That's it. Yeah, it's great.
Okay.
Not much.
You're only as loud as your fez, which is perfect.
Well, then, in that case.
There we are.
All right.
Brian, introduce yourself.
I'm Brian K. Morris, writer, publisher, award-winning author now, I'm astonished to say. Facebook famous YouTuber and former mortician's assistant, and I do all kinds of books. I do write comic books every now and then when asked, and I edit The Zombieful World of Oz, so there.
As well as a few other books along the way.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that one. I forgot about that awesome book. With
Charles
a wonderful...
feels really bad now.
We're still leaving Charles out. Yeah.
Are we? I'm sorry, Charles. Well, when you are so desperate like I am to clamp onto somebody with real talent, you hold on as tightly as you can. So.
Which is part of the editor's job, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And the nice thing about an editor's job is when the editor doesn't do his job properly, it's still the writer that gets blamed for it, so it's all good. So
there you go.
See, Brian's very clever because what he does, he says things to me in little notes, and I think, does he really mean that, or is he joking? And then when I see him, he laughs, so I know he's serious.
That's right.
You see what I mean? He's covering it up with his laughter.
That's why we sugarcoat our criticism. which is how it's delivered as nicely as it is.
Well, you've got to get your writer's head on, because don't forget you're criticizing writers. And you're
okay, I get my writer's hat on. Hold on a second here.
No,
we got this covered. Okay, one for every occasion. Now I'm ready.
We just lost Russ, so
we
his internet
made him
really
flee
is
with
shit.
terror. No, actually, I should be wearing this one. Hold on here. I'm getting a menagerie of hats here. With the Zombie for World of Oz logo on it, so... I know, Randy. So anyway, as you guys were saying before I so rudely interrupted...
Yeah, that's better. The green didn't really go with our color scheme this morning.
Oh, I'm sorry, Charles, but it does match my flesh most of the time, so...
Welcome back, Russ.
Hi, Russ.
Yeah. Internets.
Yes, internets. I was having trouble with my cable box yesterday. I had to I had to call them and get a new one. I kept getting they said, "What's your code? What's the code on the box say?" And I said, "It says toot." T-O-O-T. I think somebody's having a joke. Signal wasn't coming through, and there was T-O-O-T on the box. He's like, "What?" It's hard to explain to somebody when they're over in India. But,
well, I had my cable go out last night during Comic Book Spectrum.
Oh,
that was exciting. Fortunately, I had somebody I'd accidentally given a wrench to. And I was I was using my phone to text everyone else, "Get Carl in here, get Carl in here." So we drafted poor Carl to be the director for about 5 minutes.
Yeah, Mike Jimmy's in the house. Indie Comics Network says, hey, Mike Jimmy. Let me scroll up here just a second. Right there. Hey. Good morning, Mike Jimmy. Anytime you want on the show, I just figured you were working. So anytime you're not working, buddy, you're welcome on. HR recognizes the elements of style. Yep. That's a book I got very early on in my writing career. And still open it every once in a while just to remind myself of how many of these rules that I really don't know. So Mike Jimmy says, I always mock letter pages before starting with the art. It really helps getting a feel for the page layout and saves a lot of time lettering later.
I mock them all the time. I put them in front of me and laugh at their faces.
Exactly. Look, Brian, I need my idea machines, okay?
We got you covered.
Renato says, hi, guys. Hi, Renato. Thanks for listening in, buddy. Nice to have you here with us. Everybody says hi and hey. And in the chat, speaking of doing it, Daphne is just under 200 away from her final stretch goal of 8K on the Ego Raven campaign. So go over there and take a look at that on Kickstarter. Ego Raven. Happy smiley face. I am only comfortable with the Fez. The other two making me feel kind of weird.
in a good way, I hope.
If she makes it there, there will be a badass sticker. Plus, I'll suck the toe of Satan.
Ooh.
Well, I actually know what that means.
That's HR this morning.
HR, please report to HR this morning. HR.
And of course, there's a link in the chat for that Kickstarter campaign. Go over there and take a look at it when you can. It says, I got a friend hopping by a little bit later. There's a raging headache. Oh, sorry, buddy. Hope you feel better soon. It's Friday. Must have partied hard Thursday, I guess.
Yeah, that's because he doesn't get any sun up there.
That could be.
His photosynthesis isn't working.
And you're talking about his location, not his height. So,
yeah, it's
exactly.
Way up. There can't be any air up there for Mike.
So I'm skipping today. Just occupy the chat. That's fine, Mike Jimmy. You're always welcome. You can catch whatever porn bots we might attract. That'll be great.
He is one.
That's my next villain in Rammer.
Porn bot?
Yeah.
There you go.
I like that.
It's still engagement.
Exactly. All right, where were we? Books. Anybody's got books about writing they want to recommend?
We were writing, and since we got an hour and a half left, I figured I would take you guys to school.
There we go.
Do it.
That's what we're here for.
All right, here's the deal. The problem with the writers you guys deal with is that they're not artists as well.
Yep.
And I am not an artist, but I sketch out my stories before I script it. So I create a plot, and then I draw the whole story in ridiculous stick figures to see if it's going to work visually. And then I write the script based on that. And the artist never sees my chicken scratches unless I absolutely have to show something visually. And I'm wondering if any of you who work with writers, if you ever get sketches from the writer.
I worked with a writer once in the 80s, and he didn't give me any sketches. I don't think he knew what a pencil was. The writing was good, but he left that all up to me.
Yeah.
I was the storyteller, as it were.
And I do understand about direction, that the less direction you get, the better. But sometimes I think the writer just feels compelled. I've got to explain the angle of this shot.
It makes a ton of difference.
And sometimes I think it's a good idea, and a lot of times it isn't. And I have found the more I pull back and don't give the artist direction, the better the art looks.
Mm-hmm.
Because an artist who knows how to do great angles knows how to do great angles.
Right.
Yeah, it helps sometimes.
I think it's always
who you're working with.
It's a communication.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
that's why I always
it's back
try,
and forth, isn't it?
Yeah, I always give an artist, before I give an artist a long assignment, I give him a short assignment. I give him a tryout, which I pay for. Maybe a 4-page story, and if that doesn't work for whatever reason, if we're not simpatico, then I'm not going to give him a 28-page story when a 4-page story was like passing a grapefruit.
Good point.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I work usually for other editors and other publishers, and I don't have any control over who I get to work with. And so sometimes I have discovered I need to idiot-proof my scripts at times. And so I will put in too much detail. But if I knew I was working with somebody, I've got a couple of people that I work with regularly, and so I know I can pull back because I can trust them to put in the proper angle and such, and I don't have to explain them because they're on the same wavelength I am.
But how many times have you thought you idiot-proofed something and found out, I guess that was not really, I didn't really explain myself because what I got back, it doesn't make any sense.
I did that one time, but it wasn't either of our faults. The person who was illustrating a story I had written was English wasn't even his 4th or 5th language, and he ran my script through Google Translate.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So any coincidence to the original source was strictly coincidental. But most of the time, I try not to over-explain. And something, as I used to draw, so I do have that advantage. Mm-hmm. But what I also do is when I write my scripts, I write the physical descriptions first. And I sometimes will have my dialogue and my captions and such running about a page or two behind what I am drawing as far as what the reader will see in terms of the art. And that's helped me a lot. Because then I can just look and see, okay, is there a flow to this? Am I doing more than just saying somebody is talking? Because those are the panels that I think can really mess up a story, where you have to do exposition, you have to deliver information. But, well, it's like, I say one of the best books for comic writing is How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way.
Yeah.
And there's about three or four
point.
there's about 3 or 4 pages where they show a scene in a boardroom, and the people are just clearly talking. Yeah. But there can still be a dynamic to it, like body language.
Sure.
Which is something a lot of people don't think about. I feel that I'm constantly talking with my hands. Mm-hmm. But it's better than me just sitting here like this, especially in a comic book panel. And plus, you can use that body language to convey personality, to move the scene forward a little, and it's and it beats just having your hands down in your pockets or something.
As someone who's more towards the art end than the writing end, I would say exactly the same way as I was mentioning earlier about camera angles and what have you, and some artists currently, okay, I think some artists lean heavily on the tools that they use rather than being able to actually tell a story or actually create an environment, and you see it so often with anatomy. The key to good anatomy in comic books is exactly what you're saying, Brian, and that's its posture, its body language, its weight, its believability. So you
have
can
to
have
be
the
able
most
to draw,
extended.
though.
Exactly. You have to be able to. You have. There's people that have extended styles that do weird stuff with their styles. Okay, like Sean, what's his face, who did Batman White Knight, and he has these elongated and weird faces, but he still manages to get in believable body language and weight and emotion into what he's doing, and so often that's missed. Faces are really important, and it doesn't matter how realistic the face looks. If it's not conveying the right emotion, you're not telling the story. It's just a pretty picture.
Yeah, Russ, and that's an excellent point also about emotion, because I've worked with a number of artists that just do the usual, they're either on their characters or they're the emotional gamut runs from A to B. So
I remember years ago seeing the difference between Jack Kirby and Gene Colan. Now Jack Kirby obviously is the best thing since sliced bread, but his depiction of a splash page, I think it was in the Avengers, and they're all standing there made of granite, looking like gods, all really handsome and really up for it. Fantastic, real comic book work. And then when Gene Colan drew a similar, I think it was in Iron Man, but the Avengers were in it, and he had Iron Man sitting down, slumped with his elbows on his knee, on his thighs, and I don't know, it was one of the other characters was looking out the window, and that's because Gene Colan's more of an illustrator, I think, than a comic book artist. He was showing like real people. Jack Kirby doesn't draw real people, does he? He draws gods, doesn't he? But Gene Colan and it looked like you're in somebody's lounge with Gene Colan's art, but they just had silly suits on. But when you looked at the Jack Kirby page, you thought these people are going to destroy anything that comes at them. You understand what I mean? And there's that subtle difference, but both work because they're obviously both masters. But I just wonder, and getting onto the writing bring Stan Lee in. That was Stan Lee's genius, that he could let Jack Kirby do that and he could let Gene Colan do that. He recognised that. I don't think he gave them much direction, So.
No, guys, I get you.
It's all about the art. No, but this is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
You're talking about Jack Kirby not drawing real people, but it was a real revelation when I saw the unpublished True Divorce cases.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm just talking about.
I mean, that stuff is unbelievable. The subtlety that he showed. I mean, you expect bombast from Kirby, but in that stuff, the True Divorce cases, there was real subtlety, great visual storytelling, and some of the most beautiful women he's ever drawn.
Yeah. I was talking about the superhero area. I know Kirby can draw properly.
Simon and Kirby are credited with creating the romance comic.
Yeah.
So
and some of those are beautiful, and you can even have scenes where it's like I discussed earlier, just a pair of people talking, but Kirby knew enough to say tilt the angle of the panel a little or something, just that you have to study the panel to realize what a genius he was in presenting just a quiet moment between two people and still making that panel worth looking at.
I have a question for Russ. Russ, you mentioned artists relying too much on their tools. What did you mean by that?
I mean using 3D programs to draw people.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And using
Yeah.
through. I mean, don't get me wrong. Okay, we have to underpin this every time. Neil Adams said anybody who says, any artist who says they've never traced is lying. Okay, that's the bottom line. We all use all kinds of tools and all kinds of things. We trace, we do whatever we need to do, especially back in the day when. Sorry about that. Especially back in the day when people were had so much to do, they had so many pages to get out. They did whatever they needed to do, and that is, it's all valid. You get the job done. This isn't a pissing competition, okay? This is about getting a story told on paper and getting it out the door and published, okay?
Mhm.
So you have to bear that in mind, and it means that whatever tools are available, whatever they may be, are all valid, okay? So I use 3D stuff on occasion, especially for environments, or if I need to pick up something like a specific thing, like an airplane or whatever, a specific type, you know, you go do that kind of stuff. That's fine. You use it occasionally. And something that I don't do is I don't use 3-dimensional products for people, for anatomy. I just won't do it. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's okay. People can use it all the time. But what you don't want to do is rely on it to the point where you're forgetting the humanity of the anatomy that you're producing. Okay,
Yeah.
and you're losing the emotion because you're tracing over it, thinking that's a fantastic dynamic pose that I've just got out of Poser or whatever you might have used, 3D Maya or whatever it might be, and you've forgotten all the emotion. You've forgotten the nuances of the way people move.
I think the bottom line is, if whatever the technique is, whether it's some of the writing or the art or photo reference, whatever it is, if it takes you out of the story, if you notice it and you go, oh, I see how he did, you shouldn't, no matter how you achieved the final artwork, as long as it's seamless and it draws you in and keeps you in the story and doesn't take you out of the story, so that you're noticing, oh, look, that's, I could see how he did that. You shouldn't see behind the curtain. You should just see the curtain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good point.
I think you have to be careful when you're tracing and things. I mean, we've all done it, yeah. But you've got to be careful because all of a sudden you've got a really good drawing, haven't you? Your previous pages are rubbish because you drew them, and then you trace somebody's pose, and it's like, wow, look at that. And then the next page it's rubbish again. So you soon learn not to do that one, I think.
Or you see an artist who is drawing from several sources. That's I used to love Rich Buckler so much when he first started, but then after a while he relied on other people's poses, and you might have a page where, okay, panel 1 is a Neil Adams reference, panel 2 is a Gil Kane, panel 3 he's back at Neil, okay, now he's doing Kirby, and panel 4, you know, when you can go through and you go, okay, that's from Batman 251, that was from New Gods, you know.
But imagine the time spent finding the pose you want.
Yeah, I had a friend who worked for Buckler, and Buckler used to tell his people, he used to have magazines in a spare room in his studio, and according to my friend, he said, just pick out the poses, it's quicker that way. And I'm like, how could it be quicker? Because, you're flipping through the magazine when you could actually be sitting down and trying to draw it.
Not to get us too far off topic, but Comics Journal for the longest time used to run a regular column where they'd put up somebody's artwork and then show where they pulled that from originally.
Yeah.
I have some of that ready for what I thought could be our discussion this morning. But if we go into this in depth, I've got I've got some stuff that I pulled.
We will definitely do that in a couple of weeks, Charles.
Yeah.
We'll have to compare schedules and make sure you're on that show.
Thank you.
So, absolutely.
But talking about writing.
Before we get back there, when Glenn was talking about the difference between Kirby and Colin, that's why Kirby was doing Thor and Colin was doing Daredevil.
Yeah.
It's a real street level character. I remember Lee saying one time that he had given Colin an assignment for a couple of people talking in a room, and he ended up getting back panels that were so beautifully obscure and dramatic that he had brightened up the entire conversation because he'd focus on a hand grabbing a doorknob as opposed to two people looking at one another and talking. But you see, so much in modern comics anymore. You see the stagnant, faces of people looking at one another with the dialogue running in between.
Well, there's that great panel in the Marvel book that How to Draw Marvel, where he shows the hand with the phone, rather than the guy. I think the first panel, the guy standing there with the phone next to the person he's talking to, and then the way to do it is to show the hand really close up with the phone, and the other guy just back in the distance.
Exactly.
And just little things like that.
You can get a lot of that, especially writing wise. You can get a lot of that by looking at not cinematography, but direction books for cinema. Long shots, bird's eye views, that kind of thing, and get an eye for the dramatic by looking at this, because there's some really awesome I want to say cinematography books out there that are helpful for the sequential artist as well.
I think if you watch any Stanley Kubrick film, you'll get a lesson in how to tell a story.
Just any of the classics, really. The
Alfred
people
Hitchcock.
that are, or Citizen Kane. It's just amazing. Any noir film, I love to tell, especially them kids nowadays. If you haven't sat and watched Turner Classic Movies for a while, you will pick up so much storytelling, even instinctual. If you just sit there and watch some of these old great films that were
which is what Kirby was doing when he was 12, 13, 14. He was spending all day in the cinema being dragged out by his mother. What's that film called by Polanski where the guys come out the water with the wardrobe? Is it called The Wardrobe? Yes. Where they walk through the town and things happened. I don't think anybody says anything, or at least they don't. They just walk through the town with this wardrobe. And
there's a collection of his early stuff on one of the Criterion collections. Right. I can't remember what. I think it might be maybe it's Knife in the Water, that has all his shorts. His first short, which was done as a student film, is literally 15 seconds long.
Wow.
And it's one of the most amazing pieces of film you've
Does it just
seen.
say a film by Roman Polanski, then goes off?
I don't remember. All I remember is the visual of a person coming. This is what I remember: a person coming into a room and stabbing another person. And it's maybe 15 seconds long. It's so beautifully shot. You would think, well, that's just kind of gross. No, it's amazing what he could do with 15 seconds of film.
Considering what happened to Sharon, that must have been quite something. But anyway.
Yeah, he did his Macbeth right after that, which is pretty gruesome.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah, Polanski's, I think, highly underrated. Even though he's highly rated, I still think he's highly underrated. Have you ever seen The Tenant?
I don't think so.
I've heard of it.
This is a movie you've got to see. I think it's the one he did after Chinatown, when he could pretty much do whatever he wanted to do.
Right.
And so he did something that, it completely bombed, but it's an absolutely amazing movie in which he stars.
Right.
And Melvin Douglas and Shelley Winters are in it, and Isabella Adjani. Don't
tell us what happens.
No.
Yeah, really.
There's no way I could even summarize the story, but that it's a absolutely fantastic movie, among the best movies I've ever seen, and among his best movies, and it's not that hard to find, but very few people know about it.
It's amazing what HBO Max has done. They have a Turner Classic Hub. And there's a lot of these classic movies. They just keep on file all the time. I mean, if you ever want to watch Gone with the Wind or Citizen Kane, all you have to do is run over there, and it's usually there. So as well as they have a great noir night. They used to back when I was able to watch it, where they had somebody narrate a couple of really great noir films, black and white, and just amazing stuff.
You showed Elements of Style. I want to hold up a book that nobody's ever heard of, that everybody should read.
Sure.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
I've heard of that too.
How to write this book?
I'm going to blow that up, Charles. Give me just a second here. There we go. Right there.
F.A. Rockwell. How to write plots that sell. It is one of the best books that describes what a story is.
There you go.
And how a story is structured, regardless what the story is, it doesn't matter. Every story, every good story, is structured exactly the same way.
Yeah.
And when you read this book, it opens your eyes. You go, oh yeah. Wait a minute. What about this story? Let me think about that story. Oh yeah, that's the underlying structure of that story too. And it graphs the ebb and flow of stories, and how you start out with a protagonist, and you need to know what that protagonist wants. What is that protagonist trying to do, trying to achieve, and what's going to get in the protagonist's way? And as the story progresses, the protagonist achieves something small, but then there's a setback. And the protagonist overcomes that setback, achieves something a little bit bigger, but then there's a bigger setback. And this goes on and on in the story until it looks like the protagonist is about to achieve the ultimate goal, and then there is a gigantic setback that looks like doom.
Mm-hmm.
And yet somehow the protagonist overcomes that. And that's the structure of every good story. And it really opens your eyes. You're like, oh yeah, if I just keep that in mind when I write my story, you're not going to see, the reader's not going to see that structure, because it's hidden. It's like the framing of a house, or the skeleton of a building, but it's there and it holds everything up. And if you're seeing it, then the story isn't that interesting, if you're seeing that structure. But if the story is interesting, you're just swept along. You're swept along by the structure and the ebb and flow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was in a Barnes and Nobles a couple of weeks ago, laughing at their small graphic novel section compared to their immensely huge manga section. And there's a couple of kids around the corner, and by kids I mean older teens, early 20s. And one kid was saying to the other kid, well, Star Wars or Harry Potter is actually Star Wars with wands. It's the same exact freaking story. And I'm sitting here thinking, of course it is. It's a hero's journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Star Wars ripped off 40 other stories.
Oh yeah. Well, that's a whole nother matter. It's a mishmash, mixing bag of a bunch of other elements. But I wanted to jump in on the conversation, but knew better. But let these kids discover it for themselves, the writing and stuff. But it kind of irritated me at the start, because they were dismissing it as it's it's a white guy. It's a white guy that gets lucky and becomes a hero, and blah blah. And it's like, oh, dude, you're missing the entire point altogether.
I heard a similar conversation, but nothing to do with comics. When I was in Florida, the Apollo 14 command module was on display, and there were these kids in front of me. They just be about 15, and one of these kids said to his friend, he said, "Apollo sucks. It only goes to the moon."
Was he trying to be funny, or did he?
No, he was trying to. You could see. I was watching them. He was like the bully. He was trying to impress on this little kid who didn't have a clue about what day it was. Never mind anything else. But he said, "Apollo sucks. It only went to the moon." And there he is looking at Apollo 14 history, and he just doesn't get it. And the kid who wasn't even thinking about it got it more than he did,
Yeah.
Yeah, and the more you learn about those old spaceships, the more miraculous their success becomes.
The more you realize they didn't go. That's just a joke. They did go.
Yeah. Was it a tin can atop a pile of another tin can of gasoline, all made by the lowest bidder?
That's right. Yeah. They said that. John Glenn said that, didn't he?
Yeah.
When he was on his Mercury flight, they said to him, what were you thinking when it was 5 seconds to go for blastoff? We're thinking, I'm going into space. This is wonderful. I'm going to be the first American in orbit. What were you thinking? He said, no, none of that. I was thinking that what you said, Brian. It was made by the third lowest bid.
Yeah.
It's all good stuff.
Back to writing. Mike Jimmy says, my writers generally don't do anything on the art or figuring out layouts like that, but I've had them from commissioners, and they really can help to look into their heads.
I think it depends on how precious the writer is. So, for instance, for a lot of the stuff for Doctor Who Adventures magazine I did, which was the kids stuff, and also for the Batman stuff I get from Jason, who edits and writes that, they tend to just trust me. So they say this happens, and they give a loose breakup of what happens in each panel. But if I want to add panels, I can do what I like, and as long as the story works, that's great. It runs through the editors. It runs through the editors at Panini, at DC, and what have you. And as long as they're happy, then yeah, it's fine. So they don't get too precious about the story. Precious is probably a little bit harsh. It's a harsh word to use.
But
I didn't mean it in that way. But
Right,
but yeah,
right.
it's like it's not just about being precious. It's about getting the right story done and about telling what you want to be told.
You've
But
heard the phrase.
the looser it is, and the more communication you have between an artist and a writer,
See,
the
that's-
better the outcome.
I know that Chris Claremont is a great writer, but he is the reason I stopped reading X-Men because it was too wordy for me for a comic. I stopped reading it.
Which is weird because a lot of the Bronze Age stuff and before was quite wordy, wasn't it?
Not as wordy as that.
No, not as wordy as that. But then the trouble is once you started getting ideology into comics,
Yeah.
they want it, and politics. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of that, and certainly to have analogy, move through a story is very good, so that people can think about what they're doing. It gives gravitas to the story in certain cases. But if you pump too much of it in, or if you try too hard, then it stops becoming the fun medium that you picked up the book for. And again, don't get me wrong. You look at manga, you look at European comics. You can have whatever you want in a comic and tell whatever story you want. But the idea of trying to funnel all those kinds of ideas and ideologies through superheroes is utterly ridiculous, because that's not why you're there reading a superhero book. You're there to have fun. It's getting away from it all, isn't it?
And I think too many modern writers nowadays have used Claremont as a starting point.
Yeah, they don't draw from outside the way that the people like Claremont's generation and the people before him did. They pull from movies and books and other non-comics material, whereas like the last 40 years, a lot of stuff has been comic work from people who have learned it from comics.
Yes.
And not drawn anything new. I'll tell you, Russ, you brought out, bring out something about Claremont. What drove me off the X-Men books when he was writing, and I agree, he's written a lot more X-Men than I ever will. And he is a fantastic writer. But what got me was the fact that all of his damn characters were so self-aware. They're like, oh, I'm doing this because 20 years ago for breakfast I put margarine on my toast instead of butter, and now I'm scarred forever. And it's just this microscopic self-examination, and they knew exactly why they're doing. I don't know why I do half the crap I do. I am totally unaware of what my sources are for my various phobias and quirks, but every Claremont character knows exactly why they do what they do, and that must be nice, but I can't relate to that.
Russ, you mentioned Precious.
Yeah, I was being harsh.
Well, it
Stop looking at me when you say that.
But it reminded me of the phrase, you've heard the phrase, kill your darlings?
Yeah.
Okay, and I just pulled this from the web. You have to learn, literary hopefuls are told, kill your darlings. In other words, you have to get rid of your most precious and especially self-indulgent passages for the greater good of your literary work. So that thing that you think is so incredibly clever in a story, it could be a passage of dialogue, whatever it is that you're like, that's just unbelievably incredible, get rid of it.
True.
That happened
So
to me.
true.
I interviewed some of the men who walked on the moon 30 years ago, and I wrote an article for a magazine, and I sent this, and I ended it with this. I don't know what it said now. It's 30 years, but I ended it with this fantastic paragraph about what Apollo meant to me. And then when it was published, the editor had taken that out, which is precise. And then I read it again. I thought, oh, that's not good. It's a bit, it's a bit cheesy and all this kind of. But I thought it was brilliant at the time. Well, they took it out, and I'm glad they did. You've got
Great
to,
editorial decision.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Let get we need a bell on that.
Ding.
Yeah, there.
There we go.
Well, especially for articles, I coming from a journalism background, I feel the less there is of the writer in it.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, the better most articles tend to be. If like in my stuff, when I used to write for like Back Issue and stuff and Hogan's Alley, if the word "I" is used in there, it better be a quote from someone else, and that's it. When the reader doesn't care what I like. We're there to tell this story about something else.
I had a professor who had a great phrase. He would pick a passage in a particularly overwritten passage in a novel and say, "This is an example of, look, Mom, I'm writing."
That's good.
Yeah.
I like that.
So writing for comics, though.
Oh yeah, that.
Yeah.
I think in some ways I'm somewhat, although I'm older, I am somewhat in that group of writers that is affected quite heavily by the stuff that they've read and watched. Because when I did Only Death Can Save Us, it was definitely a love letter to the things that I loved.
Sure.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand that. But saying that, I took a lot of the things that I wrote about in there from my interests in science and nature and what have you, and maybe a personal perspective of death, as it were. But I can understand how those things have a major effect. I mean, I'm sitting here talking to 4 writers, and I know you're an artist writer, Glenn. But definitely people who can write, who have written and have done it well. And I'm the novice in the group, and I haven't actually read the books that you talk about, the books that tell you what the best things are, how to write. I definitely wrote from my gut. Okay.
Yeah.
And I did, however, go and take advice, and I did look out for certain aspects of like story structure from other people, and from the things that I'd read, the things that worked, the things that I could see that worked. And part of that was, not writing too much dialogue and not getting too into the weeds. The
only books I've read on actually producing are the Marvel Way and the Will Eisner book. I've not read any of the writers' things. What I would do when I was a kid, I'd look at those comics and just look at them for hours and hours and hours and try and enjoy it, and then finally you sort of mature a little and you sort of get into the reasons why it happens. And then you start to emulate that and then work it out in another way for your story. That's what I've done.
Yeah, definitely for me as well. It was like reading Fantastic Four and Thor and the Avengers and crazy Stalin stuff. And that was what I wanted to recreate. I wanted to recreate a cosmic tale where big entities beat the living daylights out of each other. That was what it was about. It was a comic. It was fun. And that was what I aimed for. And fortunately, had the help of Rick on scripting, where he amended certain things, and it did help the flow. But it's almost an editorial job as well, what he did for me there. So
you said about writers giving a description of a particular page or panel. Well, if I can just show you this is my own book. My writer head. You know Hatch. Strange things happened to him on his little asteroid. The writer said that this Japanese Second World War aircraft was to fly over his hatch. Right. But then the artist kicks in, and you've got to make it dramatic. So I did that.
Ooh,
okay.
Oh, right. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, and my first instinct, if I were to draw it, if you'd given me that description, would be to start with Hatch and then looking up at that thing. But that gives it such a powerful sense of size. That's a great choice.
It's just that. The only thing I did wrong on this spread was colour it on the computer. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that now. I'd get my brush out. But there you go.
Right.
It works because it sets the scene.
Mm-hmm.
you know. And it's
Yeah,
an
no, it's
actual
good.
Japanese. It's a Mitsubishi 255 or something. I referenced it, you know, like you should do, and just had it flying over.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Good choice.
Thank you. That's the either the upside or the downside of being the writer and the artist, or the writer or the artist, or whatever. I could have changed that. I could have done something else.
When you're writing comics, if the story doesn't work without any words on it,
Mhm.
there's a problem. I think
Yeah.
you should get 75% of what's going on
Yeah.
just by looking at it. And the analogy I like to use is that the pictures, to use a sports analogy, I'm not a big sports guy, but the pictures should be the play-by-play, and the words should be the color commentary.
Yeah.
But you should be able to
good.
understand the game
Yeah.
by just watching the game.
Well,
Yeah.
I said
And
this
then the
before.
color commentary gives you that fleshes it out for you.
This
The
is
nuances, yeah.
I've said this before, that comics are like silent movies, aren't they?
Very much.
Yeah, and
And-
Kubrick,
and-
getting back to Kubrick, he used to say that too. He used to say
Yeah.
that about movies. Watch a movie without the sound, and if it doesn't work, then it's not a good movie.
Well, my favorite film of all time is 2001,
Me
and
too.
nobody speaks for the first 35 minutes.
And
Yeah.
there's only 40 minutes of dialogue in
Yeah.
the whole
And I-
2.5-hour movie.
I've heard so many people say, "What the hell was that about?" And I think if you watch it,
Just
which is
watch
what
it.
you're supposed to do. You use your eyes.
Yeah.
And I've often said on these programs, on these podcasts, that comics are silent movies, and the words are the scenery. You don't need to know that guy's called Reed Richards. He's
Yeah.
just a guy who's doing that. He's stretching, doing that. You don't need to know his name. That's just the scenery.
Exactly.
And Galactus comes along. You don't need to know he's called Galactus. He's just this big guy who's going to ruin the world.
It's a giant G on his
Yeah,
chest.
and you
with a dead hippo.
you don't need to know that he's a god. He looks like a god.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
You don't need to be told.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And that's why those Kirby and those John Romita and John Buscema and all the masters, that's why their work works, because they understand the medium. They're good artists, but on top of that, they're the best storytellers, like Steve Ditko and Wally Wood. They're the best storytellers, and their art is beautiful, but that's the sideshow.
Yeah,
the actual rendering I'm talking about.
Kirby's character Blastar. Okay,
Yeah.
I don't need to be told he's full of rage.
Yeah.
I just
point.
need to look at him.
Well, what Stan Lee misses, that Blastar is Ulick's brother, is that guy in New Gods' his brother. What's he called? He's the same. It's the same guy, isn't it?
Yes.
The same drawing with the big hair and.
Yeah, just like Casper is dead Richie Rich.
There you go. Now,
Or
there's
his hot
fan fiction.
It's hot stuff, a dead Richie Rich.
Speaking of Kirby, though,
Ooh.
not that we ever do, you can see the rage in him, can't you, in his comics?
And yeah, every Richie Rich comic is filled with rage.
Right.
Yeah,
I would imagine Gene Colan was a pretty laid-back guy, because there's no
Yes.
rage in
Yes.
no rage in those drawings.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, and
But with
didn't Roz
Kirby- Kirby's
talk-
fighting Germans, isn't he, all the time, and punching everybody on the street.
Yeah, Roz used to say she would watch him draw, and you could just see him acting everything out
Yeah.
I bet.
as he was drawing.
That's what you should be doing as a sequential
Absolutely.
artist. You should be. My wife comes in and says to me, "What are you doing?" I'm like making all these weird faces, and I'm not looking in a mirror. I'm just feeling the emotion.
Yeah.
I'm standing. I'm contorting my body because somebody wants to. Somebody's explaining something and their hands are out, or their hands are to their face, or they're contorted. They're in pain, and that's what you do.
When I drew that,
feel those
I was
things.
making all the
like a little kid.
And
But
sometimes
that's what you do. You should
you
be
can
doing
get sometimes you can get very melancholy if you're writing that kind of scene.
Mhm.
Like
yeah.
you can become as moved by what you're writing as the characters are.
Well, because quite frankly, if you're not moving yourself, you're not going to move the reader.
Exactly.
That's right.
Really?
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
it's the way it works.
That's exactly
Yeah.
it.
That's why anybody who asks me about any advice I have on dialoguing, It's like you go up in front of a mirror and say it. And if it doesn't sound right when you say it, there's a problem.
And also, if other people think it sounds odd, check your diction.
Yeah.
You know,
All the time. It's a really good, healthy thing to do.
Frank
Well,
Miller.
it's true.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I completely got that the wrong way.
Yeah, Frank Miller in Daredevil. Frank Miller once did something that I'd never read writing like this before, and I thought it jarred me, not because it was wrong, but because it was so new. And there was I don't even remember the characters. They were incidental characters. It was a middle-aged couple just being playful with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And he just, I don't know, maybe he just grabbed her side or something, and she said one word, tickles.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, that's a new level of writing that I've never seen in a comic before. It was so natural and so real that's why it was jarring. Because it was real, and because it was natural, and because it was something that somebody would actually say in real life. Mm-hmm. And how often do you read that in a comic? Almost never.
True.
If Claremont would have written that, it would have explained why she.
Yes, there would. Yeah, about her history with being tickled.
Tickled. Yeah, I think that the problem is there's this drive from certain quarters to bring the real world into comics, and comics should be relatable because of the natural way that the story falls off the pages and how you connect with the characters, not because they are you, or not because they have your experiences. They're there to connect with you on a sort of a subconscious level, and things like that kind of right in there, Charles. That's exactly right. It's like that's the kind of thing that would happen in a real world. It doesn't mean that immediately after that scene, the guy can't leap out the window and do something crazy.
Exactly.
But you've still connected with your reader in a very, very human way.
No matter how fantastical the setting is. I mean, what is more ridiculous than a guy who has his powers because he was bitten by a radioactive spider? Okay?
Yeah.
And yet, because you believed Peter Parker and you believed his situation, you didn't even care how he could swing from Forest Hills to Manhattan.
No.
Yeah.
Now, if you've ever been to Forest Hills, it's pretty far away from Manhattan, and you can't swing anywhere from Forest Hills.
Well, and also the idea that I've got all these amazing powers, I can cling to a wall, I'm warned of danger. What am I going to do? Become a professional wrestler.
Yes.
It's like I'm looking for money quick. How do I turn what I've got around?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be a professional wrestler. That's it.
And then in true realistic style, he couldn't cash the check because it was written out.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And think about the honor of this character. That could you, if you were Peter Parker, could you have resisted killing Flash Thompson with one punch? That takes a lot of character. That takes a lot of honor and a lot of self-restraint.
Notice I'm sitting here thinking about it.
That's one of the best scenes I thought in Man of Steel, where Clark's being harassed by the bully and his dad's watching him. He's backed up against a chain link fence, and his dad walks over and goes, "I know you wanted to punch the hell out of that guy, and you didn't." And then the camera pulls behind Clark, and Clark has grabbed the pole of the chain link fence, and you could see his handprint squeeze that pole, and said, "I know you really wanted to bash that guy's face in, didn't you?"
That's because those comics way back then were about Spider-Man was about Peter Parker, really, wasn't it?
It was.
It was Peter Parker who happened to be Spider-Man rather than something like they do now. Whoever puts the suit on is Spider-Man, which doesn't
exactly right. And I was going to say, nowadays, if that exact same Miller scene had been written, the girl would have pulled away and said, "That tickles, you're treating me objectively, and Trump is still evil."
Right.
Because when I was 2 years old, my parents tickled me, and a clown came out and did it.
Right.
So,
That requires consent.
Yeah.
No means no.
Yeah. That's right. Well, that's the thing. Also, as these characters have evolved over the years, the early Peter Parker I could relate to, because we all have money problems. We all have a relative who needs a little extra TLC. Whereas now you've got Peter Parker. Yeah, he's headed up his own multinational corporation. He switched minds with his deadliest enemy. He's banging a supermodel, an actress.
Boring.
Yeah, and I'm like, I can't relate to any of that except the supermodel part. My wife's a hottie, but anyway, but it's just like the comics have built up this thing around themselves that and. I'm finding a lot of titles now unreadable for that reason. They're no longer relatable.
Plus, we already have Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Why
we do. You're right.
Why do we need somebody else doing the same thing?
It's like the politicians. Exactly. They can't understand why we don't like what they say. Like I was just thinking about Nancy Reagan when she said, with the drugs, just say no. So you got this big guy leads with his knees on your chest, saying you will buy it. No. Oh, okay. I just walked off.
Nancy said, "I'm going to say no."
But talk about telling a story without having it written right in front of you. You go back and you read those early Spider-Man books, which I think everybody should do.
Oh yeah.
You see how Ditko draws Parker. You see how Ditko deals with the high school situations, and even how Spider-Man is bouncing around. It's completely different. And you see as 3 or 4 years later, Ramita comes on. It's a completely different character, completely different feel to the title, because of the way Peter carries himself. He meets Mary Jane. He's going to college, and it's so. That's why these comics are the classics that they are. Is because Ditko knew how to draw the everyman, and he did it.
Exactly.
Yeah, his 8-page.
Ramita knew how to draw the domestic characters, and he did it.
They were suddenly good looking, weren't they? In
Yeah, Ditko's 8-page fantasy stories, I think, are an even better example of that, because the stories are even simpler, and maybe have just 1 or 2 characters doing something in 8 pages, and you don't need any of the words to see what's going on.
And yet, on the other hand, he could turn around a Doctor Strange story like it was nothing and have him walk through an interdimensional rift where there's all sorts of weird things going on in the background that the movies still can't get 100% right today. I mean, they can get close, but they can't do it what Ditko did.
What was great about Doctor Strange that I didn't really understand at the time, but I do now, is that he was the only Marvel character that didn't have angsty problems.
Yeah,
he just had adventure type problems.
I think he did at the beginning when he started out, when he had
his origin. Yes,
he came out of haughtiness.
Yeah,
he had such a big head about himself being a surgeon. Yeah,
I think a lot of this is some of the things you were saying about the way Peter Parker changed and what's happening now with Spider-Man comics and with comics in general. I think the trouble is that they're afraid to end the story. The companies that own these products, that own these IPs, they keep regenerating them, and they keep becoming more and more ridiculous because of the regeneration. Instead of saying, "No, that's the end of the story." There.
Well, a lot of that comes from a lack of creativity.
Well, yeah, but some of it comes from that whole essence of episodic storytelling over a period of time, and you kind of run out of ideas of where to go. I mean, I know a lot of people say, well, no, you just need a good writer on that, and fair enough, that's a valid thing to say. But over a period of 40 years, when you're turning out comics on a monthly basis, your characters will have done quite a lot of things, and it's the company, the corporate behind it is saying, no, we want to keep Spider-Man, obviously, because it sells a bucket load. Yeah. But the people that are generating these stories are like, he's done everything. What do we do next? Which leads the episodic content, and the fact it's gone on for so long leads to these more fantastical story elements building up.
When
on
you
top
consider,
of each other, instead of it just being Peter Parker.
When you consider how big the real universe is that we live in, how many times has Galactus got to come back to eat Earth when he could go out there? There's a trillion of Earths.
He shouldn't have
just
come
fooling
back.
around.
He shouldn't have come back even the first time.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Thor might have run into him when he was out floating through space.
That works for me. Getting back to Spider-Man and Ditko. Ditko didn't want to take him Parker out of high school.
No.
And that might have been. I think long term, that might have been a limiting decision. Of course, then again, you don't turn to Archie Andrews and look for character development.
I was just about to say. Then it becomes Archie with spider powers.
Yeah.
Isn't it remarkable what you're saying there, Brian, in the way that you can, how can I say this? Over the past 50 or 60 years, the editorial have decided, or somebody's decided, that Peter Parker can't be 17 anymore. He must be at least 28 now.
Right, after 60 years.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But what I'm saying is that they've decided he's got to age. Captain America, Nick Fury can't be 90 because they were alive in the foot and all that. Yet they will expect us to believe that somebody can swing around on a web.
Exactly.
And fly.
Yeah.
And Galactus to arrive. So why don't you see? Because I've said this before. If I was going to make a Fantastic Four film, I'd set it in the 60s.
Amen.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Exactly.
Skinny ties, hats, all that gear.
Make it a period piece.
Yeah. And I would do the same.
The FF was
with all
designed as a Cold War
when you
statement.
try to make things real, you get into trouble. One of the most jarring things for me in the Fantastic Four is at the end of the run, they referenced the moon landing. I think it was issue 98 or 97. Okay.
Yeah.
And I thought, wait a minute. We've already been to the moon on the Fantastic Four, so how come NASA isn't engaging the Fantastic Four and saying, how do we get to the moon? I know you've already been there. But it was it bothered me that it made the real world achievement of reaching the moon seem pedestrian.
Right.
Because the Fantastic Four had done it no problem. It was the simplest thing in the world. Even the Flash in an early episode flew around the moon. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right.
For superhero pseudo sci-fi comics, keep the real world out of it.
Right. You need to create your own real world, not try to reflect the real world, because as soon as you do, then you've got these two things rubbing up against each other that make no sense.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I never read DC as a kid, because I couldn't get my head around Earth 10 and Earth 59. just because they wanted Superman to be 2 foot tall. They had to.
There is an issue.
That was part of the fun for me. Was Earth 1.
Yeah.
I love Justice Society.
Oh, I did too, those annual team-ups,
And I didn't grow up, during World War II, but I love those characters.
There is an issue
because they were stuck on a different Earth.
Yeah.
There is an issue with multiverses, keeping control of them and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
But on the plus side, you can have our world, the one without superheroes.
Sure.
Right.
And you can make that one of the multiverses.
Yeah.
So that you can make it concurrent in some ways without actually belittling the advances and the things that have gone on in the real world.
Yeah, I think
okay,
we've
so
swerved.
that's where you can do that, but it goes all over.
Yeah, we've swerved into world building as a writing topic here, and this is something that I take very seriously because it can get out of control very, very easily.
Oh yeah.
And to try to create a world that is complex enough to be interesting, but not so complex that you can't keep track of it.
Yeah,
this is a tightrope walk as a writer.
It's breaking the fourth wall, isn't it? But Kirby did it back in 1941 with Captain America #1 cover, didn't he?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's right. All the World War II ones, and
so it's always been there.
Well, it's like we were talking about bringing in the real world in the late 60s. I mean, Stan Lee was bringing in things like racial inequality and protests on campus. But I did an article years ago for Back Issue. One of the things that frustrated Mort Weisinger at DC was since Marvel was pulling up the age ceiling on comic readers, that they were now writing into Weisinger going, and it's the same thing during World War II, why doesn't Superman just go and end the Vietnam War?
Mm-hmm.
He could do it in a half hour. And, all the, number of people, why aren't you tackling this real life issue? And I remember Superman, I think it was like 218 or something, first series, and even had a Joe Kubert cover on it. So you knew it was a war story. Where Superman actually goes to Vietnam. Doesn't resolve anything. It was, still a Superman story. It just happened to be outside of Metropolis. But sometimes it just doesn't work, the real world.
Alan Moore covered that in a way in Watchmen, didn't he? When he said about the Dr. Manhattan not stopping that bullet, that guy the comedian shooting the girl.
Why didn't you stop me from killing her? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And it's because you're not connected anymore.
And that's why, that's because why the Watcher never worked for me, because he's supposed to observe, but he always gives Reed Richards a little note of how to defeat Galactus. So he's not supposed to interfere, so he interferes.
The one time that he actually went back to not getting involved was the fantastic story FF 57 to 60, which I call the Doom Surfer tetralogy.
I like that.
Okay.
I like that.
And the Watcher is in that story, and he says, this is really horrible what's going on, but for once, I'm not going to get involved.
Yeah. And can you imagine the Watcher being brought about now? There'd be like, Janet Van Dyne is reporting into the Avengers. I saw this guy with a big head outside my bathroom window. They would make him a little too real world rooted there. So
I think the Watcher, the concept of the Watcher is not something in the modern world that would be accepted by some people.
In the new universe,
you have to have an opinion.
In Shooter's
be on a side.
In Shooter's New Universe series that he did with Starbrand and Kickers Incorporated and all that, he had a character that was wandering through the world called the Witness, and he was just pulled to different events, and he couldn't do anything about it. All he could do was watch.
Yeah.
The best Watcher story were those short stories of the Watcher. Were they in Tales to Astonish for a while?
I think
Tales of Suspense.
They were in one of the magazines,
and then the back of the Surfer.
Yeah, the best one I remember from back then, but showed me what the Watcher really was when this guy I can't remember now, but this guy wanted a duel with him to rule whatever. So the Watcher said, "Okay, we'll meet on Planet X." So the Watcher is hovering about 6 inches above the surface of Planet X, and the guy lands on it and he sinks into it.
Yes.
So I thought, this Watcher is worse than anybody. He's going around saying, "Oh, I can't do anything. I'm just a recorder and all this." And he sets this guy up and he just slips into this quicksand and disappears. That was brilliant.
Quicksand.
Can't pull you out of it. I just got to watch.
When we were kids, we always thought that quicksand would be the death of all of us.
All of us.
Yeah.
We'd sink fast.
Yeah, that and choking and all the Universal horror films. You put your hand on somebody's throat and they're like, ah!
I suppose we should segue to back to the subject of writing, really.
Before we do that, I always wanted to write a story called "What If the Watcher Caused the Marvel Universe?" And it had, back in World War II, he just turned on a spigot that let a bunch of radiation fall onto the Earth. And that all of the Watchers and all of the multiverse were there raising their own little ant farms in order to bring them all together like on a battle world and fight each other with their best teams. So the Watcher would just sit there and watch everybody fight back and forth until he figured out what characters were the best. He'd pull a half a dozen of them once or twice a millennia or whatever, or a couple every 10 years or so, stick them on the world and have them fight other characters.
Isn't that book called the Bible?
No, I think they call that Secret Wars too, actually.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
The Book of Revelation or something.
That's not, well, Revelation's got a lot of crazy monsters in it. But
Revelation has absolutely scared me to death when I read that. Oh, if that happens, we're doomed.
Doomed, I tell you.
Yeah,
Doomed as
exactly.
doomed could be.
Doomed. We're already doomed. Yeah. Guess what? Here's the end of the story. We're all gonna die anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the end, they died. Yeah.
Atrocity Press in the house. What up? What up, Max? Good to see you up this morning. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for listening in. Anyway, to bring us back to writing.
Yes, after mentioning death.
Another book like the one Charles showed that I've had in my library for quite a while is actually on movie script writing. Making a Good Script Great by Linda Seeger. She goes through, she's a script doctor who gets pulled in very much like Carrie Fisher was for a long time, pulled in to correct movie scripts. And she goes in and explains the basic formula, especially in the 80s movies, uses a lot of examples like Close Encounters and Tootsie and all of that, showing the arc, the character arcs in the movies, what keeps the plot interesting or more interesting as they go along, and the different doctoring that she had done on different scripts here and there in order to improve it, in order to make the movie work. And then you can apply all of that, just about everything that she says there, especially about the first, second, and third act in your storytelling in comics.
The screenwriter William Goldman also has a couple of good books on his experiences in Hollywood, and he talks about screenwriting quite a bit. And he was one of the most successful screenwriters ever. Wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, among other things. But there's a lot you can relate a lot of what goes on in a movie in comics, although they're completely different, but yet there are similarities.
Was that Goldman book called, was it How to Make It in Hollywood or something?
It's Adventures in Hollywood. But
Adventures. That's
he also wrote The Princess Bride, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
I think if you're coming at writing as naively for the first time, or for early work, I think you need to get certain things in hand first. So like, this is just the way I came at it. Speaking as someone who hadn't written before, and this is again off the backdrop of going and listening to certain people talk about it and understanding certain aspects of writing is sort of seeing it is in multi-layered ways. You've got your story, you've got your end and your start point, obviously a good middle, and a build-up, and there's certain aspects to that make it work. Mm-hmm. Then on top of that, you have your character arcs overlaying the journey of the story itself. Mm-hmm. And then you get down to the nuts and bolts of page planning and panel planning, and making sure the things that we were talking about earlier about how you display character interaction and what have you within the panels, and not making it too awkward for the artist to make that happen. So you have to kind of look at it in different layers, like an onion, like an auger, and see it in that way. This is just the way I came at it. So I definitely created the story I created with layers, constantly writing again over the top and rethinking. Mm-hmm. But definitely having that core concept of a good beginning, middle, and finale, and why the characters work, and especially with superhero characters, you need a weakness. You need to have fallibility on the part of the character, because otherwise it becomes boring. It becomes dull.
That's why I never liked Superman. Some would say you just need to write him well. But yes, I do have an issue with that. I overpowered heroes. And then something else that I can't remember where I picked this up from, but the concept that your villain, all the best villains, tend to think they're doing something right. Yeah. They believe in what they're doing.
Yeah.
Just crazy nut job villains who are just like, I'm going to kill everything and destroy the universe. They are useful on occasion. But in order to have an interesting interplay between your fallible hero and the villain of the piece, the villain must have
motivation.
They
Yeah.
must have motivation
One,
in order
what-
to make it an interesting interaction.
one of
Yeah.
the greatest parts of Superman writing, in my opinion, and you'll know I'm not biased, was Kirby in the Forever People.
Oh
when
yeah.
when he saw down the boom tube and he wanted to go down there, and he was questioning himself. I'd never seen that before with Superman. He was
Yeah.
always confident and saving the world, but in that, Kirby showed a human side to him.
What about Forever People #1, where Clark Kent is interviewing that boxer, and the boxer's saying, "What good is it that I'm going to win the belt? There's a guy out there who can leap, who can change the course of mighty rivers with his bare hands. What can I do against something like that?" And Clark Kent, after the guy leaves, is looking out the window of the Daily Planet office, and he's thinking, "What do people think of me?
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
do they fear me? And
Well, they would,
I'm
wouldn't
with
they?
you, Glenn. I had never seen that in a comic before, and that I didn't expect that level of writing from Kirby, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I was not familiar at that time with Kirby's style of writing per se, but after having worked with Stan Lee and knowing that Stan was a 1 in a million type of talent that could bring out that kind of nuance in the characters through his dialogue, to have someone else with that kind of insight with Superman, and it's like up to that point I'd never thought that Superman wondered, what does everyone else think of me?
Yeah.
Does my bum look big in this? Are these
Yeah, does this cape make me look fat?
That was one of Kirby's first outings after coming into DC after his stint at Marvel too.
Oh yeah. So he might have picked up some tricks from
I think-
Stan.
Oh
think
no,
the
I
thing
know
with-
he did. Yeah.
I think the things with Jack's writing is that his actual dialogue's very jarring, isn't it? It was totally opposite to what people were used to for 10 years with Stan Lee, and that's one of the reasons I think people don't like that series.
I was the same
think
way
you've
until I
got to
heard
get
him
beyond
talk. He talks like his dialogue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he does. One of the things I think threw people off of that series was that it was just too soon. After you walk in and there's a whole set of new gods that frankly Kirby was ahead of his time
Oh, very much
on those
so.
characters. So far, so fast, so much. And that's again his imagination. Once he jumped companies, becoming unbridled. Hey, whatever you want to do, Jack, you just do it. And that's what Jack did. And people sat back and went, whoa, look at what's this escape artist dude in red and yellow and green, and holy crap, what is all this?
What a
And
brief.
people, quite frankly, people didn't know how to handle it.
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
think
Do what you
George
want.
Lucas saw those comics?
Oh, you know,
Oh, you
Lucas
know he
saw
did,
those
yeah.
comics. And then they
There you go.
yeah. And again, you still can't match the level of imagination that he had put into those books. You just on screen, you just can't do it. You can get
No.
close, you can throw some circles and little Kirby jagged lines in the background, but that's you still can't hit that bombastic level of imagination that Kirby had with those Fourth World books.
True.
I'm still waiting to see somebody walking through as Mr. Miracle and have him look right.
We mentioned that
In real
Jimmy,
life,
the
I mean,
Jimmy
it's-
the Jimmy Olsens that he did.
Yeah.
Those are fun books.
Yeah.
Those
Crazy
are
books.
great.
And again, it's Kirby unbridled. He's gotten away from all the constraints at Marvel. He's over at DC. They're basically saying, take Jimmy Olsen. It's our lowest selling title. Do whatever you want. All of a sudden, well, what he wants to do is bring in Newsboy Legion, because that's what he drew back during, when he was a kid, and bring in all sorts of other crazy devices, and introduce the universe that he had created. It's just amazing stuff.
Well, and also for me at least, he revitalized the character of Jimmy Olsen.
Yeah.
Because, for like the first 120 or 130 some issues, Jimmy Olsen is like, well, I wonder what happens if I drink this potion. Oh, wait a second, I'm in trouble. Z.
How about if I dress up as a woman, which he did twice?
I'm not here to kink shame, Charles. What he does on his weekends is up to him. But anyway, but all of a sudden, Jimmy Olsen became a dynamic character.
Mm-hmm.
And, it wasn't him doing things and then waiting for Superman to save him. In fact, in the Kirby's first issue, Jimmy says, I don't need you, Superman. I can do this on my own. And that for years, Jimmy was, and in fact, after that, when Murray Boltinoff took over the title as editor, he became, quote-unquote, Mr. Action. Because that's what Kirby had turned him into, a positive, proactive character. Now, in recent years, he's gone back to the Jeepers, Mr. Kent, sort of Jack Larson personality times 10. And I don't think the character is sustainable like that.
Could you imagine what would have happened if there'd have been enough hours in the day and DC would have just turned over their entire set of characters to Kirby? Could you imagine what would have happened? That would have been incredible, wouldn't it?
They wanted to give him Superman.
Yeah, they wanted to give him Superman. They also offered it to Roy Thomas at that time too, just to revitalize it. But no, I wrote an article. It was never published. I wrote for the Jack Kirby Collector that. Like he did that 1 year of The Losers, which I think is some of Kirby's best work ever.
Yeah.
But what if they'd given him other titles for a year? Like, I think I looked at Batman and Green Lantern, and I couldn't remember what the other. But could you imagine a Kirby Green Lantern?
A Kirby Batman?
Kirby Batman, yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be bonkers.
That'd be way against type. Just imagine the villains. Holy crap.
Oh, God, it'd be bonkers.
Oh my God, yeah, it'd be absolutely insane. But you could also see some of the stuff that he did for DC, kind of creeping into what he did for other, what he would do for other characters, and that was the thrust of my article. But I would love to just see him. Okay, you get the Flash for a year. Okay, now here's Justice League. Here, take Wonder Woman. Just give him a title a year and let him work his magic on it. And that's the thing. It's like that's one thing that frustrated me about his Our Fighting Forces. It didn't really follow the Robert Kanigher stuff all that well. But the thing is, the minute Kirby left, it was like those 12 issues don't exist.
Yeah.
It's like there's this gap, and Kanigher's back, and he's writing the same stuff he did, for 400 years before. So, which is kind of a shame that they didn't build on that.
Well, they couldn't build on it, could they? If they'd given Kirby all that stuff to do, imagine what would have happened when, like you say, other people either came back to the title or new people came in. They just couldn't match it.
Well, like Black Panther.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Or even Captain America.
And like my favorite,
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Who they turned into some superhero warlock guy with a wife, didn't they? Whatever they do with it.
They had to stick him on a different world for a while too.
Yeah,
they didn't know what to do.
Him was more powerful than Galactus and Darkseid put together, but they didn't go down that route with it. They couldn't do it. They had the imagination.
Yeah.
So
it'd be fun to watch somebody try, though. You're given all these great building blocks.
Yeah.
And to see, and unfortunately, you can accuse Kirby of the same thing. Like when he took over Black Panther or Captain America in the 70s, he completely ignored all the stuff that went before him.
Yeah, but they were his
characters. And God bless him for it, because he
gave
him some incredible stories. But by the same token, the people that succeed Kirby are like, well, turnabout's fair play. These issues don't exist in continuity anymore. Although we're starting to recognize them now, which is a good thing.
50 years later.
50 years later, unfortunately, not enough of us appreciated it at the time, what kind of genius that we were seeing. So,
like I said, way ahead of his time, just unbridled imagination.
So much so.
I still think that Kirby's Eternals was going to be the best thing, but he obviously left that, didn't he?
There's a lot of charm in there that people washed over and whitewashed after he left. Yeah. Well, it's just like New Gods. It can never keep New Gods running.
No.
Because they can't match. They have no idea what Kirby, they can't match that level that Kirby had when he did the book originally. Even though they desperately try, and there's some great talent that's been on that title. They can't pull it off.
Well, I always felt that that's what Carmine Infantino found out when I think he was instrumental in getting Kirby to go over to DC in the first place. But I think they just wanted him there, and then when they had him, they didn't know what to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, probably so. Well, and that's the thing. In my opinion, I think Kirby's strength is not so much. Well, granted, world building. Kirby was the king of that. He could create like an entire civilization and make you want to know more about it. But it all boiled down to one person. Mm-hmm. That when you see, like, say, Superman going to Supertown, we're filtering it through his perceptions. And you know, like the great story in Our Fighting Forces about the black guy who was the racer, you know, the runner.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it through his eyes. I think Kirby was smart enough to know that, yes, I can show you all this grandeur, but we need one person to see it and be the reader, to be able to ask those questions. And, you know, why is this happening? Why is it this way? And to experience the wonder through their eyes. Whereas a lot of people just see, oh, I've got to build like a 400-foot tall robots, and they've all got to have this crackle around them. You know, they see the surface stuff that Kirby does, but they don't really go into the nuts and bolts that really, as a writer, make the work. So.
Can I just say a plug here? He talks about that story with the runner on the DVD. He talks about it on there, and you can read about it in there.
Yeah. The William Goldman book, by the way, is Adventures in the Screen Trade.
That's it. That's
okay.
We had it between all of us.
Yeah, and there's a sequel. There's a sequel as well. Both books are really good.
Yeah, and J. Michael Straczynski wrote a book on screenwriting that's really, really awesome. And he's done it. He's done the work.
Yeah.
There you go. That's it, Randy. Thank you.
Complete book of script writing.
Wow.
And also, if
J.
you're
Michael
any sort of
Straczynski.
writer, pick up his book, Becoming a Writer, Staying a Writer. If you're not fired up by the end of it, you won't never be. Ooh. I am verdant with jealousy, Randy.
I got some. I'll show you something maybe on another show that'll make you even more jealous. I was at a show one time that he was at, and I bought a pirated screenplay of the pilot of Babylon 5.
Ooh,
and
nice.
stupid me actually took it up to him to have him sign it.
Way to go!
Yeah, oh yeah. He was mad, and I said, "No, I'm a writer. I'm never going to resell this.
Yeah.
I'm going to study it. I would like to have your signature on it. You know, I'm sorry if you know I bought it pirated or whatever." And he wrote an inscription on it. That was amazing. So,
dear Randy, go to hell. Quit buying this pirated
No.
stuff.
It was like this is Randy's screenplay, or this is a pirated screenplay that Randy bought and has promised never to resell. Under fear of being, I don't remember exactly. It was a long time ago, but I've got it back here. I'll pull it out one of these days.
Yeah.
And then he signed it, and the signature that he signed on the screenplay is so much better than the signature in his in the script writing book. And he wrote everything else out by hand and then signed it. I'm like, yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's like
that's
a double
awesome.
plus on that. Yeah. Just great. But yeah, you go out there and you get books like that. You go out there and you find screenplay writing, and you find other people doing comic scripts and learn how they wrote. And you don't have to adapt it, or you don't have to do exactly what they did. Do your own style of screenwriting or comic book writing. There's no one way to do it.
Yes,
And there
please
never
don't
should be.
imitate someone else.
Yeah, please don't imitate someone else. Don't do a play and expect it to automatically turn into a comic, or you have to know how to break things down by panel, but you don't have to break it down by panel if you have an artist that you rely on and know that they can do it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much more to it as well. There's like page turning as well, and pacing, and things that writing a script for a comic or writing a story for a comic is so much different than writing it for film or for the stage or for television.
It's harder.
There's obviously continuity between all of them because they're exactly as Charles pointed out. They're all a visual medium.
Yeah,
I'll give you a really good example of that. Louis L'Amour, the Western writer.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I worked with his son, Beau L'Amour, on the first graphic novel based on Louis L'Amour's work. And I worked from a screenplay, an unfilmed screenplay that Beau had written based on one of his father's short stories.
Okay.
And talk about taking somebody to school. I mean, he took me to school as far as learning how to write a complex story, but I had to explain to him, I said, look, there are things in this screenplay that would work so well in a movie that are not going to work at all in a comic. And usually what it was is subtle gestures. A hand gesture, an eye gesture, just subtle body language, things that in a movie you cut to that person, you see their hand, you see their even a twitch of a shoulder or whatever. It's going to work so well in a movie. And I said, there's no way to draw this. It's not going to work. It's going to be a wasted panel. It's going to be confusing. We're going to need a caption explaining what you're looking at. And there were maybe 5 or 6 places in the screenplay that had this great film stuff that was just not going to work. And he readily accepted and understood that. And I'm glad that his mind was as open going into that as mine was, because I learned an awful lot from him. And he even mentions in the afterward that he writes about his learning process of what works in a comic versus what works in a movie.
Yeah, I used to edit scripts for a very small publisher about 5 years ago, and I had so many people that, like studying Kirby, they see the big picture but don't look at the little nuances that make it work. And too many people had picked up a screenplay and suddenly thought they were an expert on comic writing. So I would get some script, panel 1, 20 people, each with their own expressions, are doing all these things, and then they move to another part of the room in the same panel, just before they all leap out of the window, each one with an individual pose. And then you couple that with a 250 word caption, and then they wonder why I'm sending it back to them. The thing is,
not everybody gets it right the first time through. I've said that before here on the on the podcast. Yeah. It takes a little while to realize the medium you're working in and the restrictions, as well as the expansion, the possibilities.
Well, and the thing is, I think the people, it's kind of like music or acting or any other performing art, where somebody is so good at it, they make it look simple, and everyone then thinks that they can do it the same way. It's like you see a Michael Jordan. I always use Michael Jordan as an example. You see him, like, he flies across the ring like somebody repealed the law of gravity for him, but you don't see the 10,000 shots he made where he couldn't hit the basket for nothing, but he practiced and figured out how to make it work. Exactly. And a lot of people, God bless you, Russ, for studying the thing and making it work and putting in some depth to your writing, in that a lot of people just think, well, all I have to do is just put words on a panel.
No.
And then I go home at 5, and it's just look at Stan Lee and you think, boy, that guy was a genius in the 60s, and then you forget, or you didn't know, he'd been writing this stuff since the 40s, so he's put in his time.
It's not even that, but you don't realize the true genius that Stan Lee had.
Exactly.
When you see it on the page, when you read a comic on the page, that if you know the process, then you understand that the genius of Lee wasn't his plotting, it wasn't his sitting there and standing out story points and working out the overall arc. It's the fact that he knew and worked with people who already knew that instinctively and had done it for so many years, that he could talk to them over the phone, which most of the time apparently he did, and the artist is there making notes. And then 2-3 weeks later, there's a completed artwork for a book on his desk that he sat there with a legal pad after he had done all of his work for the day, and sat there and scripted out what words each character was going to say off of the notes that were probably written on the side in the gutters of the original art page, because he didn't remember all of the plots either. But he had enough genius to be able to pass that on to talented people. His genius was in delegating authority.
Right, and staying out of their way.
And being able to script over what their genius to make a comic and to make it more coherent and pass it on.
Part of Stan Lee's genius as well, like you say, was recognizing that those guys didn't need to be told so much and they could get on with it. I've told you before, I used to work with people who had degrees in geology and mathematics, and they'd tell me how to do artwork and print when I'd been doing those two things longer than they'd been alive.
Right.
Which used to piss me off a little. And they couldn't. They thought I was being stubborn, and I'd say, you can't have a 3-page brochure.
You fool.
So he goes and asks my manager, and the manager says, yeah. So he believed him.
And
He thought I was being awkward.
One of the big crippling points today is not only that, but so many people, especially up in the industry, it seems the bigger companies now are writing comics because they can't write anything else, or they've consider in their head that they've lowered themselves to writing comics.
Yeah, the view of books as a medium, as an art form, is very low in the West.
Yeah,
you know, it's its own art form, its own medium, properly respected in Europe and in Japan.
And the classic comics are the ones that recognize that.
They think
not in the UK as much.
They think it's pickleball. I can't be an athlete, but I can play pickleball. I can't write, so I'm going to write comics.
Yeah,
exactly.
I can't get a job in Hollywood, so I'll go and write a comic. It's like, no.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've seen that the last 10 years. I tried to write a screenplay and couldn't take it anywhere, so I decided to write comics.
Yeah. And if people knew how complex the nuts and bolts of actual good comic book writing is, because I'll tell you, I do a lot of novels, I do a lot of short stories. It is infinitely harder for me, more difficult, I should say, to write a good comic book script than it is to write a mediocre novel. Because there are more rules.
Yeah, and a comic book also has a limited real estate.
Exactly.
And a story, if a story is going to be, let's say you're going to write a short story and it's 7,000 words or whatever it is, okay, there's so much flexibility in what those words can be.
Exactly.
But a comic book page, you've got, you not only have story sensibility, but you have a graphic sensibility that you have to keep in mind. It's the marriage of graphics and narration. That in a novel, especially, you know, if you're going to write a 50,000 word novel, well, you can have an awful lot of crap in there. But
and I do.
and in comics, you have to put that narration and the graphics together into short, sharp beats.
Yeah.
Boom,
Yeah. If
boom,
anything,
panel.
Yeah. If anything, comics are more like stage writing. Because you know, Charles, you mentioned limited real estate. You've got a stage. That is all you've got, you know. And if you can have people doing things out in the audience and stuff, but for the most part, most stage plays take place on this thing that you can, a child can throw a softball across, especially if you're dealing with smaller stages, and everything has to take place there. So you are limited to how much scenery you can use, the type of scenery. It's a real limited budget on there, whereas movies, even your low budget films, you can shoot them anywhere and you have fewer rules. But again, the stage is great training for comics.
Well, you just gave me an excuse to mention David Mamet, another great writer, because you mentioned the stage, and he said that theater is two people on the stage talking and maybe there's one chair.
Yeah.
You don't need all the bells and whistles. You don't need the big production. You don't need the $1 million set on the stage. Two people talking. And he said a good radio drama can work, should work on the stage.
Yes.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
You don't need the bells and whistles. Just like in a comic, a good comic can be 2 or 3 characters going through a story that you tell visually.
Yeah, exactly.
Ditko did it in those 8 pagers.
Oh yeah, well, I think one of the best sequences in comics, I think it was Amazing Spider-Man 32, I think it was, where Dr. Octopus has dropped the building on Spider-Man.
33.
33, thank you.
Yes.
And even if you just look at the art, you see there's something going on. There is a struggle, but Stan Lee's words bring nuance to it, and you find out why he is doing all this stuff. And this is where the artist had control, where where Ditko was the one that plotted that out, and I could just see it would go into some sort of Ayn Rand sort of thing very easily. But you had Stan there bringing heart and humanity to this one man struggle, and we're watching a man who basically is saying, it's basically Hamlet, to be or not to be.
Yeah.
Would it be easier? I fought so hard. Maybe I should just sit here and let it happen. No, I've got to fight back, sort of thing.
This is the thing between the artist and the writer, because I might be wrong on this, and tell me if I am, but I don't think that sequence in Spider-Man 33 was actually mentioned between Lee and Ditko.
I don't believe so.
Ditko
he just delivered.
sequence.
He just delivered it, and we forget how long. We forget how long that sequence is.
Yeah,
It's about
It goes on for quite a few
three
pages.
Is it 3 or 4 pages?
I think it's at least 4. It might be.
I
even
think
more.
it's closer to half a dozen. It's a
I think
good
you're right.
chunk of that comic by the time you get to that full page thing where he's pushing up the rubble. But you find yourself reading this,
and you don't
you
even
forget.
care. You don't even care how does he get back up to land.
Well, he goes out on the water, doesn't he?
Yeah, but we never see that. We never see him leave that underground
That's true.
fortress.
Well, we already knew he was going to succeed when he lifted the machine.
Yes,
The-
yes, exactly.
Like,
We don't need to. We
didn't
don't
have
need
to
to
show
see how he got back to the surface.
If in James Bond in You Only Live Twice, I think it's not You Only. What's the one where Connery came back in 1971?
Oh,
Never Say Never Again.
Never say never again. Yeah.
No.
Oh,
no,
no, the one Joe St. John.
Diamonds are forever.
Diamonds Are Forever.
That's
He's
what-
as I remember it, he's in a coffin, isn't he? And he's about to get cremated, and we don't see how he gets out of it.
Exactly.
No, that's true.
In the book, we do.
It was like those old serials, and I actually saw them where, like, in chapter 11, the guy's on the hero's on the plane explodes. He couldn't have possibly have gotten out. And then chapter 12, it starts out with, after his amazing escape, the hero goes too. You're just kind of ignored, and we fill in the parts for him.
No, you don't understand. In chapter 11, they're showing the plane. They show the plane blow up, and then in chapter 12, when they restart, they show him running into the plane and then jumping back off before it takes off.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this one is like no explanation whatsoever. He survived.
Yeah.
Move on.
I remember seeing one show at the cinema when I was about 10 or 11. I can't remember what it was, but they were fighting in this truck, and it was heading, the good guy and the bad guy, they're fighting in the truck, and it's going for the edge of the cliff, and you see the truck go over the edge of the cliff, then it ends. Next week, we're all back there, and they're fighting. They do a rerun of the previous 2 minutes, and they're fighting again. You see the edge of the cliff, and then just before it goes over the cliff, we see them both fall out, and then the truck goes over the top.
Yeah,
exactly right.
Always such a cheat.
That's what made those serials great, though.
You ever seen the original? You ever seen the original Batman serial?
Oh yeah.
The action is actually pretty exciting, but the worst costumes that have ever appeared in a superhero depiction in a movie, those costumes are so utterly stupid and ridiculous. But the serials are not that bad.
They were done on the fly, the lowest budget you could ever possibly imagine. So
Yeah, what got me about those, especially the first one, Batman throws a punch and then his cape, from the action of throwing that punch, the cape just comes totally wrong. So Batman has to fix his cape. Robin is beating the hell out of everyone because his cape's staying in place. So there's a lesson for all you potential superheroes. Keep your cape attached.
I remember back in Captain America when he decided to become Nomad the first time. And he had a cape, and he ends up stepping on it and tripping over it, and he grabs it and rips it off. That's why he always had the 2 discs sitting on his shoulders without a cape attached to it.
Well, that's also why Adam West had like a little piece of Velcro or something under his cape, so that because it was constructed very similarly to the serials one, but they had something under the cape that would keep it in place when he had to throw a punch. So
you remember Commandy's costume that he had? No, seriously, he had for about a half an issue.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
At the very, very beginning, he's given some sort of, I don't know, slave costume or something.
Yeah.
And it's an incredibly cool design. And he takes it off halfway through, I think, issue 2. And we never see it again. But that costume design, I thought, boy, I don't know if they've ever revived it, ever shown it again. But go back and look at it. It's an incredible design that Kirby just it's like he just threw it away.
Just threw it away. Yeah, he
Yeah.
probably sat there and just drew it up on the fly and just, here you go.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, gee, jeans, cutoffs, and a pair of boots. Charles is easily impressed by costume design.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yep.
but simplicity works.
Go take a look, and you'll go, oh yeah.
I've forgotten about that. Yeah, I'll have to go back
yeah.
and look at that.
It's a shame he threw it away because it's a very nice design.
Yeah.
But actually better than most of his DC designs.
I don't think it's here in my rack somewhere. I got Command
Yeah, it's in.
one,
I think it's at the end of 1
have
and
to
the
take a look at it.
beginning of 2, and that's it.
I'll go back and look at that.
And
Maybe
with
it just
that,
took
we're
him
going to
longer
have
draw.
to say what, Glenn?
Probably took him longer to draw, so he thought, I've
Yes.
just put the boots on the jeans.
I'm losing money here. Yeah, let's get
It's
rid of
after
it.
the great disaster. What's a kid need? Just cut off shorts and some boots. That's all.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And with that, we're going to have to stop this episode of Comics by Night. We want to thank everybody for watching and listening. If there's any way that we can help you in pursuing your art, if you have any technical questions, anything that our panel here can help you with, definitely contact me at thezimcast@gmail.com, and we'll address that as soon as we possibly can on our list. The next couple of Comics by Night are going to be very special episodes that'll be pre-recorded. So stay tuned for those. They will be running Friday mornings at 5 a.m., no matter when I record them. But we'll get those done. I've got a couple of guests lined up, hopefully, that will get here on tape for you to enjoy. So tune back in for those. That's Comics by Night every Friday morning here at 5 a.m. It's early or late morning where Glenn and Russ are. So, and real early morning where Brian is. Almost night, right?
Yeah, it's still dark outside, so.
Okay. I was going to say sun's probably just about to come up. So.
Well, the fact that I'm drinking coffee instead of like water or some other beverage is a good indicator what time this is being aired.
Brian, tell folks how they can find you.
Hey, go to risingtide.pub. It has a link to all my broadcasting, all my books. I'm also findable on Facebook, and I'm exploring TikTok, which is turning into a black hole of my attention. Because there are too many people doing like recipe redos and things like that, useless things like that, and it's sucking up a lot of my time. But otherwise, go to Amazon and buy the books that do get produced. And thank you for having me with this wonderful group of people, Randy, as always.
You're always welcome on, and whenever you can. See, Michael Lanning says, I can't remember the last time I saw Brian out this early.
Hi, C. How you
Good morning,
doing?
everyone. Morning, C.
Morning,
You're
C.
doing well. Atrocity Press says, never forget the page turn when writing a comic. Also,
Amen.
Yep.
Amen. That's good advice.
Russ, tell folks how they can find you.
You can find me at russleach.com. Everything you need to get hold of me is there. YouTube channel connection, Instagram, all the silly social media stuff. You can find it all there at russleach.com. And that's it, really.
Great. Charles, tell folks how they can find you.
Well, they can find Rammer on Amazon and anywhere else that books are sold online. Rammer is Rammur. He is the master thief in a future police state. You can find me on Facebook, sometimes on Instagram, and even on that cesspool Twitter occasionally.
Okay. Glenn, tell folks how they can find you.
What would we do without Amazon? You can
Amen.
find all my work there, but if you want this, get in touch with me, and you can find me on Facebook, and or you could send me an email at comicsunlimitedmagazine@gmail.com. And you can find me on these podcasts with Randy on today on Sunday, and you can find me on my own podcast or co-presenting with Ted Davis, which is Comics Unlimited podcast, and that's on Thursdays, 10 o'clock EST, on Ted Davis Artistry.
Okay. All right. And folks, if you want to see my work on Amazon, you can check out the latest issue of Comics Unlimited. I got an article in there, or you can look at War of the Worlds Infestation from Caliber Press, which I wrote a 5-issue series that they still keep in print. Thank goodness. I'm really happy that that's still out there, because
Can I just say that the only person on this panel today who's not written for me on Comics Unlimited, I think, is Mr. Brian K. Morris, and he needs to.
There you go.
I need to step it up. My reputation could use the boost. It's true.
I don't know whether you get a boost, but I want you to write me an article.
Yes, dear.
Get on with it.
And Comics Unlimited, each issue's got such a wide range of stories, so you've got plenty to choose from.
British comics and American comics and everything.
That's the first thing I had to do. I had to figure out what to write. Yeah, what I was going to cover. But anyway, you can find me on Facebook if you look hard enough. I'm over at Twitter too, but you don't want to look there. You'll find me again Sunday morning at 9 a.m. doing the Sunday Funnies. Glenn should be there. Brian's always invited. Russ is there occasionally. Charles never gets up in time. But no, just kidding. Just kidding. No, you've been on there, I think, once or twice. Where we on Sunday Funnies, we talk about the comics that we love, the comics that inspired us to keep doing what we're doing and to inspire us to do what we do. So definitely check that out. Sunday Funnies at 9 a.m. And then on Wednesdays at 8 p.m., I do the Zimcast, where we talk more about the business side of things. And it's a little bit more adult and a little bit more opinionated show, talking about the business and the inner workings of that and comic news and the stuff that makes the world go round, pretty much, in the world of comics or not. So that's the Zimcast at 8 p.m. on Wednesdays, Eastern Standard Time, here on the Indie Comics Network. If you haven't subscribed, go over to the Indie Comics Network and subscribe, please. We're growing our subscribers organically, which means every one of them is real. So we've got the views already for the wide variety of shows that we do. We just need the subscribers. So go tell your friends, tell them to go over there and subscribe as well. And if you get a chance, if you ever have a campaign that you need to have fulfilled, you're going to want to mail that your products out in Gemini mailers, which keeps your product nice and snug and secure while it gets tossed in the mail. So, and if you go over to Gemini Comic Supply and order a bunch of Gemini mailers, as much as you can, and on your way out the door, you hit that coupon code RAGIN10, RAGIN, the numbers 1 and 0, they'll knock 10% off of your order. And right now, 10% can be a lot. So go over there and do that. Make sure you go over, like I said, over to YouTube. Check out the wide variety of shows that we're offering. There's more shows on the way. I've even got a series of instructional videos I'm putting up now, little short videos, 15, 20 minutes long, talking about different things, drawing different cartoon characters or drawing different aspects of cartooning that we've picked up along the way or from the classes that I teach after school. So go up there and enjoy those as well. So not all of them are going to be for kids, though. Got to warn you. So sometimes as soon as I get 100 views over there, I'm going to do a video on how to draw Demon Bitch by Christy Shin.
Cool.
So it'll be fun. It'll be fun, but very adult. Here's one for you, Charles.
How dare you?
I knew you couldn't go through a day without getting that. We're going out the same way we came in. So everybody take care. Here's our great opening. And we'll see you next week, next Friday morning. We will be here, even though it'll be a pre-recorded program. So take care, everyone. We'll see you soon.
What was that? This is not a charade. We need total concentration. Now, once again, this time, with you.
When your timeline reaches its Armageddon, what's a kid to do?
I'm not a...
Snag the keys to your mom's experimental ship, of course.
That's not quite how it happened.
Drift aimlessly in the rift between dimensions, trying to figure out how to operate it.
Now hold on a sec.
Pick up a few hitchhikers.
Hi! Hello.
And maybe solve a disturbing mystery that could lead to the destruction of reality itself.
You know, if there's time...
There's always time.
I'm not so sure about that.
Get in on the adventure with the Rift Riders on Indiegogo.
What is it?
The stuff that dreams are made of.
Huh?